go over Chapter 4 today. The other day when this one sort of has an effect on today, and that's why I'm telling it to you. The other day when we listened to that Ditel thing, I screwed up and I lost all the ability to work with Camtasia. So yesterday I went up and talked to the guys in IT, and they thought they could remote in and fix it, just from upstairs. They said, it should be fine now. Well, it wasn't. All right, so then they said, well, fine, we're too busy now, so send us an electronic help ticket, and we'll get to it when we can. Okay? So they did that, and they didn't get to it yesterday, even though I told them 2 times and it was free, and they didn't get to it this morning. So I came in and managed to figure out what the problem was myself. It was something in a Camtasia setting that had been reset. So that's been reset. The only thing is that with putting that the DVD in that we had the other day, that Ditel DVD, the sound quality that I've got right now is a little different. It sounds a little tinny. I'm still going to work on the settings and see if I can fix them, but for now we'll just live with what we've got. So if you haven't done so already, and you very well may not have, but you can go out to the P drive for the class. You know where it is. So you can go out to here. You can go out to there, and there's a folder with today's date on it, and it's got the working versions in the 012215 folder. You have no P drive? That happened to somebody else the other day. What may work is that your flash drive that's in there? Okay, because I think it was left in there for the other day, wasn't it? You may want to just literally cold boot the machine. All right, so, or you can try a restart first, and if that doesn't work, let me know, and we'll get it fixed then during the break. In fact, here, I'll do this. Yeah, but what I'm saying is probably faster than you can even, if you haven't restarted yet. If you already have, it's fine, but if you haven't, let's see if I can just throw it in there. All right, it's in the P drive. It's on your H drive where you've got the other folders. All right, so the idea today is to go over Chapter 4, Basic Object-Oriented Programming. The other thing that I put out there, just so you know, and they're not fantastic, I literally just did it right before class, is I found a few sites out there that have got some stuff in here. Now, this is a free book, so if you want to learn more just about object-oriented PHP, that's one of those things from IT eBooks. Now, it's a little dated, 2007. Well, no, that's a lot dated. No, but the ideas should still ring true, all right? So that's out there, and I believe that's what's on here. There's that URL, all right? Then these are always good. Anything that you ever get on code.tootsplus.com is always good. And this is, again, a newer, but still a little old, about 4 years old, 3.5. Object-oriented PHP for beginners. I've read that one, and that one's good. All right? And I found a couple of other ones. There's a guy, he's got a site, his name is Stefan Mishtuk, and he's from some other country. I don't know what Mishtuk is. But he's got a site that's called killerphp.com, and you can buy videos and stuff from him, and he puts some stuff out there for free. I actually bought his set of videos. They're good, but they're not great, and they're very technical. And he has a way of explaining things. This is just me speaking. You may or may not agree if you ever saw any of his stuff. But sometimes I'm more confused after I've watched his videos. All right? And I'm not saying they're bad. They're chock full of information. But sometimes the way he puts things I find to be a little bit convoluted, for lack of better words. But that's out there. Learn object-oriented programming in PHP. And that's only about 30 pages. And then another one that's about 30 pages. Oop, the PHP 5.3 way. All right, and I have not looked at these, so how good they are or are not, I'm not really sure. All right, other than, like I said, that the code.tootsplus one should be good. All right, So I'm on page 119. Again, the plan is today we go over Chapter 4, Basic Object-Oriented Programming. Next Tuesday, Chapter 5, Advanced OOP. Next Thursday, Chapter 6, more Advanced OOP. All right? And then the following week, Chapter 7, Design Patterns, and Chapter 8, Using Existing Classes. Then we only have 2 chapters left after that. So we're making good time and good progress right now. Again, just in case anyone was planning on doing their project in PHP, all right, you may go, oh my God, no, PHP, no. But if in case you were, I thought I would go, that the reason I went with this book was to go over some of the object-oriented capability. Plus, again, what we will do in 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 3 weeks from now, is we'll go over Chapter 9, which is building an entire CMS from the ground floor using object-oriented PHP. So we're going to do that. When we do get done with that, we're going to go over Chapter 14. Then I've got an example that we're going to look at as a class for a couple weeks. That'll still only put us somewhere around week 9, maybe even before week 9. And the rest of the semester will be yours to work on your project. That's why I've said before, you're going to have to, I have to write this up, some kind of a spec sheet in a week or so, and then you'll have a week or 2 weeks to sit there and write me up a page on what you plan on doing for your project. So let's say Travis does that. He says, I'm going to do this ASP.NET project, and I'm going to do it on this. And he gets into it, and it's like, oh my God, I've bitten off a lot more than I can chew. I thought I was going to do 10 pounds worth. I'm doing 10,000 pounds worth. And not only that, I really hate ASP.NET, and I didn't realize how much I hated it. So I'd like to do the project, but I'd like to cut it down, and I'd like to change the language. You can do that. But we're going to reach a point where you're going to tell me what you're going to do, and that's what you're going to do. Does that make sense? And then that's what you're going to present along with anything else that you want to present, again, on that May 14th, that magic date in this class. The other thing I want to say to you, if you didn't see this already, if you didn't see all this already, because this is worth saying, and it's what I'm about to show you is also up on the bulletin board there, and it's up on the bulletin board, and literally it is right next to Mike, right, those 2 pieces of paper right by Mike Lemon's head there. All right, those 2. All right. First is, if you haven't seen this stuff, no, you already showed us this stuff. No, not this. If you care, there is an internship workshop, more about internships, etc., that's going to be a week from yesterday, so it's next Wednesday. Again, the sign up in there, there's the URL. You got to go in there and sign up for a session. There's 2 of them. If you go, I already did my internship, then forget it. All right. But the other one, this one is worth showing you. Not that one. I'll find it sooner or later. I'll find it. That's it. All right. As they've done in the past, Swiss Colony has internship opportunities. Now, if you're not listening, what I'm about to say will make you listen. Okay, $3,500 a month. That equates to $42,000 a year. But they're basically looking for full-time people. All right, that doesn't mean they say they still even have some summer ones available. So you can work there full-time during the summer, if nothing else, and make yourself a few bucks. All right. Now, notice what they're looking for: programmer analyst, web developer, data developer. Those you could probably handle. The PC technician. Some of you in here have hardware capabilities and have done hardware things. Other people are more like me, that I would never apply for that, because if they asked me to show them something, it would be a joke. Okay? And the project manager, my guess is that what would happen is somebody would probably end up thinking, well, you really don't have enough experience for that. But if you're interested, again, the information's out over there. Please complete an online application at www.colonybrands.com. So the reason I'm telling you that is, let's suppose that you graduate. Good, we're hoping we all do graduate, but you graduate, but you haven't gotten a job yet. You can always apply for that internship job and tell them that you can start during the summer. And then if you get another job, say, hey, can you give me full-time employment? And if they say no, why? Well, I've got full-time employment. All right? And I don't mean that you take a job with them under false pretenses, but you've got to be looking out for yourselves. I try to look out for you as best I can. But I'll tell you what, there ain't nobody else here at this institution that I know of that is. All right? So, if you're interested in that stuff, again, the 2 pieces of paper are out there. If you can't read them or have trouble or you want me to email that stuff to you, just let me know and I'll do that otherwise. All right, so let's talk some PHP OOP. Again, don't want to read to you. But a couple of the things that they talk about in this example. Some of the examples that he gives in here, all right, I'm going to show you the first one that he does. He does the old hello world. And I probably, oh, that's the wrong one. But when he does the old hello world, he shows you hello world and he shows you it in different languages. So you see we got English, we've got Italian, I don't know what, and French. All right? And we're going to go over that particular example. Then another example that he does, and he does it twice, remember these from Java, where you work with rectangles? I mean, there's kind of standard examples that most people end up using when they do these kinds of programs. But that's not necessarily bad because it gives you a chance to kind of compare and contrast the way that the stuff is done in PHP versus Java and other languages. All right? In the Java class for the first year people, just like I did with you guys, if you guys remember, I showed you those videos the first week or two, and it had the bad music. It was like the Deliverance banjo music that was in there. You may or may not remember that. What I decided to do is I just showed them where that was. And I said, if you want to learn Eclipse a lot more than you'll learn it from me, you can start by going there. All right? And some people I think have done it and some have not. The point is we're farther ahead now. And we're already through the first 2 chapters in 2 weeks, which is unprecedented in that class. And we've already written about 8 programs. Okay? But what I've done is we went and wrote a miles per gallon program. And if any of you are interested in this, if this can help you in any way, it's all out there under the 142 and the 143 folders. But what I did yesterday was we built the simple miles per gallon program. But there's no error checking in it. So that was version 1. Then in version 2, we put in constants. And we said that the miles driven can be between 0 and 1,000, the gallons used between 0 and 100. So that was version 2. Then in version 3, we actually put error handling in there with try-catch. Even though that's not until chapter 10 or 11, put it in there anyway. Then, but when we did that, I showed them simple try-catch, so you could still put in negative numbers and the like. Then in the 4th iteration of it, put it all together. So it wouldn't accept negative numbers. You had a maximum and a minimum. It did try-catch, and it did not allow you to put in non-numeric stuff. So what I just did right before class, and that's why I started a little bit later, is I went back and did the same thing in C#. All right. So in the in-class folder for for the 152, 143 class for 01/21/2015, that's got the 4 miles per gallon programs in Java, and in the 01/26/2015 next Monday, that's C#. So if that helps you at all, sometimes it helps to go back and take a look at that stuff. Great. And if you could care less, then I just took a minute of your life away. Sorry about that. All right. So the examples, again, that are in here are fairly simplistic. All right. I'm going to try to keep this down to a minimum. Notice what he says, though. Again, I'm not going to read to you, like I said the other day, what a class is, etc. But notice this. The most common mistake made is to inappropriately apply OOP theory. Object-oriented programming is not meant to replace procedural programming. You still use procedural programming in object-oriented programming. When you've got a language like PHP, PHP in some ways is like JavaScript. So PHP in some ways is like JavaScript. They're not object-oriented programming, so to speak. All right? They're object-oriented where you can use it, but you don't have to use it. Everything you do in Java, everything you do in C#, that's all object-oriented. But you can become a JavaScript programmer and or a PHP programmer and never do anything object-oriented. All right, because it's object-based rather than object-oriented. All right. So what they're saying, and what he'll get to over here someplace, is that using object-oriented programming in PHP is an alternative to non-object-oriented programming. All right? Okay. So he comes down and he talks about nouns and verbs and all that other stuff we've talked about many times. What a class is, what an object is, you've seen it before. And then he starts to tell you why you might want to do this. All right? And again, one of the basic tenets of OOP is modularity. Ideally, when you do this, as it says, your stuff is going to be easier to maintain, less messy, easier to debug, and written maybe a little clearer from the beginning. That said, some people say, I understand what you're saying, but, and then the but comes, and the but is, I already learned procedural, I got it to work, I'm happy and I'm comfortable with procedural programming, why should I learn object-oriented programming? And the idea is, one of the reasons that you should learn object-oriented programming is, yes, there's a learning curve. But once you've learned it, with some tasks and some applications, it can make them easier to write. All right? So what you start to learn in this chapter are some of the basic ways of writing object-oriented programming. What you're going to see in this too, if you remember this from Java, all right? Java, four-letter word. But remember, in Java, we got to a certain point, it was about chapter 6 or chapter 7, and then in the advanced class, where we would write one Java file, one of our Java files, it would have in there all of our methods. Then we'd write another Java file that would be our driver. Everybody remember that? We're going to do the same thing in here. That's what he does from the start in here, which is a good way to do it, I think. All right, so again, he talks about inheritance and overriding, and these two things will be discussed more next week. He talks about encapsulation, knowing how, how to use, basically just knowing how to use something, not necessarily how it works. And then again, OOP is not a better way to program, it's a different way. You could have two people that you gave them both requirements, and one was an object-oriented PHP programmer and one was a procedural PHP programmer, and if they have experience, they could both get it done and probably both do it successfully. All right? You might look at them and go, well, I do it the procedural way because that's what I know. All right? And I understand that. All right. It says, as for the technical negatives, the use of objects can be less efficient. And the reason that that can be less efficient is when you're working with objects, it's the old idea of, and again, I'm not a networking guy, I'm not a hardware guy, but I know enough that when you're working with, in the network specialist program, when he talks about packets and stuff, and he talks about sending stuff through the wire, the idea is, if you imagine the wire is a bag that'll hold potatoes. It's a 5-pound bag, okay? So it's an empty 5-pound bag. And if you want to go and throw 25 pounds in, no matter how hard you try, you can't stuff 25 pounds in to that 5-pound bag. So you take it and you break it up into 5 5-pound bags. That makes sense? So you deserialize it and then serialize it and you put it back together again. That kind of an idea. You have to do that, in virtually any kind of object-oriented language at some point or another. All right? So that's what they're talking about here. Another issue. Misuse and overuse of objects. Some people think you need an object for everything you do, which isn't true. All right. So he's going to give you an example in here in just a couple pages. All right, but I want to tell you that first, that again, the example that he gives, this hello world thing, it's convoluted, it's silly, for lack of better words, it's kind of stupid. And in his own way, Ullman says it's silly, it's convoluted, and it's kind of stupid. But he just wants to start showing you the syntax. All right? So that's what he talks about here. When you start working with this stuff, and let me bang back to here so you can see this. So this is that hello world right here. All right? Notice, too, everybody see this? Those comments look familiar? What? What do they look like? Anybody know? Well, you're almost there. Java doc comments. These are PHP doc, or typically they're called PHP Documentary comments. Talk about those at the end of the class. But when you write a class, the name of the class, and it's all in curly braces. So this particular class has no data in it. It has a method in it right here. Starts here and it ends here. All right? And that method's called say hello, and you pass in a language. If you don't pass in anything, it defaults to English. Does all that make sense to everybody? Then you just do a switch based on the language. If it's Dutch, you say this. French, you say this. German, Italian, Spanish, English, and the default. Does that make sense to people? All right. So if you passed it in and you said something that didn't exist, so if you came in and you said Polish, there's no Polish in here. So it would just go to the default, which would be hello world. All right. And I'm not sure when you do this, if you passed it in, like notice it's got Dutch here. I don't know if that's case sensitive in here or not. All right, I'd have to play with it to be sure. All right. Then the other thing that we do in here, I'm just kind of showing it to you, is inside of our regular HTML. This is a PHP file, but we've got some HTML in there. Then what are we doing? We're requiring that other file. That line is requiring this file I just showed you. All right. Then this is how we create an object in there. Look familiar? Looks a hell of a lot like Java to me. All right. Then this is the syntax. In Java, we would have said right there obj dot say hello. In PHP, you use a minus sign followed by a greater than sign. That's how you call. So this says, take this obj object that we just created and call the say hello method of that object. All right? And we call it with nothing, which will give us the hello world. We call it in Italian, we call it in Dutch, and we call it in French. Let me try that. Let me put the whole thing in here. So I put Italian in uppercase just to see what's going to happen when we do this. Notice it didn't recognize it because it was case sensitive. All right. So since it's looking for it like this, Italian with a capital I and lowercase everything else, that just means now if I refresh, there it is. Okay. All right, so it gives you the syntax. What we'll talk about in the next chapter, and it's pretty similar to the stuff that we learned in Java and other languages, public, private, and protected. But since he doesn't talk about public, private, and protected until chapters 5 and 6, I think it is, since he doesn't talk about them until then, he makes everything public in this chapter. So everything, all the data, all the methods, everything's public. Okay? Then he starts to give you some rules. He said inside of your class you can have data and you can have methods. You can have data with no methods, you can have methods with no data like I just showed you, or you can have both. It wouldn't make sense to have a class that has no data and no methods, because then why did you make it? All right? Now, look at this. This is the bottom of page 121 here. What they show here is legal. Public $var1 equal 123. Public $var2 equals single quote string, single quote, public, etc. You get the idea. Those are legal. But notice what you can't do. You can't initialize your class variables with expressions or method calls. See that? So you can't do that. How do you do it then? We'll get around that in a later chapter. All right. So he comes in here, and this is the same file that I just showed you. This is the hello world.php. So again, as I said, no data in it, just one method, function hello, or say hello, and it defaults the language to English. All right? And it's just a big switch statement that prints one of those out. Any questions on that? Anything that doesn't make sense on that? Your time to ask. All right. Now he says, now we've got this class, and he explains everything that I just explained to you right here. But he says, now that we've got the class, we need an object of the class so that object can invoke those methods. So that's what he does next. That's that hello underscore object.php. So what's in there again is the hello world, that's the switch statement, and then hello object, which calls the say hello method. All right, so he explains how he does it. Again, he's got his PHP file. He throws some beginning HTML in there. All right, then he comes in and he requires, that hello world.php file. If you didn't have that in there, all the lines that are below it wouldn't make any sense. So again, notice if I come back here and I go to this hello object and I take this file that says require and I comment it out and I go back to my program and run it again, doesn't know. Can't find the file. All right, so it says class hello world not found on line 18. So if we look at line 18, that's this one. Why? It didn't work because the hello world is defined in there. So if we come back to that, we're back. He explains again the syntax, how you invoke it, etc. All the stuff I just told you. All right, that's the same hello world. He explains that same thing I just showed you. All right. Then, and I like that when he does this kind of stuff, you may or may not, or you may care less, but if you look on page 126 in this gray box, I'm not going to read a lick to you, but what he says in there is what I told you before. The example is silly, it's convoluted, it makes sense, but it's kind of stupid. And he said, but that wasn't it. He says that it does succeed in a couple ways. He started to show you the syntax for creating a class. He showed you how to create a class. He showed you how to put methods into a class. He showed you how to create an object of a class, and then how to take that object and invoke a class's methods. Okay? All right. Okay, see the word I got the mouse pointer over here? Remember that word from Java? This? All right, we use that in Java. All right, and you'll see it sometimes as self in iOS programming. All right, but we'll see it again. You've looked at it a little bit, even the Android stuff. It means the current object or the current thing that you're working with. Notice here it's $this. All right, so please look right here, because this, no pun intended, but this example that's right here in blue, this explains it. All right, so let me see. Well, let me copy that. Edit. No. I could do that though. No, it doesn't like it. What he's saying in English, and I'll put this in there, is not that much to type. And no one's ever asked, but yes, there have been at least a couple times where I've typed public and I've left a letter out of there. You can maybe guess which letter I left out of there, and I was a little bit embarrassed afterwards. All right, so, whoops, function do. And it says here, this won't work. Print $var. I can't read any of that. Well, you can now. All right. So what he's saying is that line of code right there is illegal. Instead of saying print $var, you've got to use the this variable with it. And hopefully I'm giving you the right syntax. Let's say this will work. Should work. How's that? I think it's print $this $var. All right? I think that's correct, but we'll find out in just a minute. Okay. When the system is confused as to what you're trying to do and where you're trying to do it, etc., all right? When it's confused with that, then it won't allow it to work. So it won't take this. and he'll give you an example. I don't know if I needed that second dollar sign. That's what I couldn't remember. So this is where he comes in here with the rectangle thing. So let's just take a look at the code that's right here. I'm going to bring the code up in here instead. I think it's a little easier to see in here. So we looked at that. We looked at that. And that's something else. So here's our rectangle class. Okay, class rectangle. You'll notice that unlike the last example, we've got some data in there. Width and a height. Okay? And we've got several. We've got a constructor, set size, a get area, a get perimeter, and an is square. So we've got several methods that are in here. But things to show you. First of all, constructors in this language, you use the word construct, and it's underscore underscore construct. People say, well, why did they do it that way? I don't know. I didn't make it up. But that's the syntax for it. And this also shows you that what I mentioned to you before was incorrect. In other words, what I showed you before, that should have been that. All right? How about this? Should work. There. All right. So you come in here and somebody is going to come in here and they're going to create a rectangle object. Okay? If they create a rectangle object and they don't pass any width and height in, they automatically get set to 0 right there. That should make sense to everybody. All right? But let's suppose they don't. These are optional parameters here. So let's suppose that they pass in 50 and 100. Then width is going to be set to 50 and height's going to be set to 100. That should make sense to everybody also. We can also reset the size by calling set size. Then we can figure out the area by multiplying the height by the width. We can figure out the perimeter by adding the height and the width together, then taking the result of that and multiplying it by 2. Then we can check to see whether or not it's a square. It's a square if the width is equal to the height. Okay? So he's got simple stuff in here. Really and truly, it is a fairly simple routine. Then he comes in here the first time and he says, well, let's call it. All right, and you'll notice I put this stuff in here. So you're going to see this stuff. What he has in the book is this. He doesn't have this stuff in these 3 lines. These are not in the book. He takes the height, the width, and sets it to 42, and the height, and sets it equal to 7, right there. Then he creates a new rectangle. And when you do that one, and if you got 42 and 7, let me save this, and then I'll run it. All right, so that's rectangle 1. So there's 42 and there's 7. The area is 42 times 7, or 294. The perimeter is 42 plus 7, which is 49, times 2, which is 98. It's not a square because the width is not equal to the height. Well, that makes sense? Then if we come back and comment this and uncomment the other stuff, so now we've got a height and a width that are the same. Now if we go back and rerun it, the area is different because it's 35 times 35. The perimeter is different because it's 35 plus 35, which is 70, times 2. And since the width is equal to the height, it's a square. All right? So that's what he goes through. Again, the examples in this chapter are simplistic, but he explains exactly what I showed you right there. He shows you what set size is, he talks about the parameters being optional, etc. All right, what get perimeter is, what get area is. Then he uses it by creating first rectangle 1 and then by creating rectangle 2. Then he kind of pats himself on the back here on page 132. Okay, as you can see on the bottom of the page, this is that gray box that's at the very bottom of the page. He says, you know, it's not perfect, but it ain't bad either, and it's not. All right, notice it encapsulates all the things you want to or know to work with to know about it using a rectangle. In English, what he means there is this. If I want to go and use this, and if I go and create this, so if I create a brand new rectangle 3, let's say, all right? So if I create a brand new rectangle 3 and put different values in for width and different values for height, create a rectangle based off of that, I can call set size without knowing how it works. I can call is square without knowing how it works. All right? Those have all been abstracted from me. They're all encapsulated or hidden away. Okay? What we'll get to in the next chapter is we'll say, you know what? This is fine. We've got squares, but what about circles? What about ellipses, etc.? They're all shapes. So why don't we have a generic shape class? And why don't we have rectangle be a child of shape, and then we can do circles and work with diameters and all sorts of other cool stuff, all right, which you may or may not consider to be cool stuff. All right, then he gets in and talks about the constructor, starting on page 133 and going on for the next 3 pages. Couple things about the constructor. Underscore, underscore, construct. It's automatically and immediately called. Sound familiar? Sounds to me a lot like the Java constructor, except the Java constructor is the same name as the class. Cannot have a return statement, just like the Java constructor. And I wanted to check something before I forgot to, so I'm going to check it right now as we're talking. Why can't I overload constructors in PHP? All right, it says you can use variable arguments to produce the same effect. All right, then it says you can't overload any method in PHP, which is sort of true. It says if you want to be able to instantiate an object while passing in several different combinations, it says use a factory pattern, and they give you an example in here. All right, so you could say that constructors in PHP are a little bit more limited than constructors in Java, for example. All right, but it's always underscore, 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 2 underscores, underscore, underscore, construct. And again, you can pass parameters in. So in this case, that would expect an ID, and there you're calling it new user, and you're giving it an ID. All right, so he tells you to open this, and he wants you to come back in and set the constructor. So originally there wasn't a constructor. I showed you the final version that actually has a constructor in it. So again, he explains all that. He does a nice job of taking the code that he has in here and documenting it, and lets you see that there is some documentation as far as what he's doing. But other than that, it's the stuff we've gone over. So as soon as you create a constructor, this is, as soon as you go and you create an instance of a rectangle, that's what gets called. So if you pass it and you don't give it a width and a height, they're set to 0. And regardless of whether, whatever you pass in or 0 is going to be copied to that variable, which is that, and that variable, which is that. Again, this is all stuff we've looked at before in other classes. One place where this is different, just so you know, see this? This is PHP only. This is not Java. It says you can directly call a constructor. You can't directly call a constructor in Java, but you can in PHP. Although, as the author says, you'll probably never want to. You can. So notice what they've called right there. They create an object, and they're calling the constructor. It happens anyway automatically, so you should never want to do it. That said, you can do it. That's the key point. All right, not whether or not you'd want to do it, but you can do it. All right. Hopefully I mentioned this to you in the advanced Java class, but I don't remember anymore. Java has a destructor, just like a constructor. But in Java, you have no control over when the destructor is called. So most people don't use it. In Java, instead of writing a destructor, most people write what's called a finalize method. Well, destructors are used, and they're used a little bit more often in PHP. It says the destructor is called when the object is destroyed. So if you remove an object, the script ends or whatever. Okay? Now, sometimes it doesn't make any sense to call a destructor. Okay? But if you wanted to make sure certain database connections were closed or anything like that, you could put it in there. So if I open a database, my app is up and running, and my app's not done yet, but I don't need the database anymore, I might call a destructor, right, to stop that or to break that connection, as an example. Now, if you don't listen to anything else, please take a look on page 136, and because this is an important concept in PHP. When you define one class in another, you would define a class in one script and you reference it in another like they did. They've got rectangle.php in one file and rectangle1.php in another file. It says you must make sure the second script includes the first or there will be errors. Okay, it says to that end, PHP 5 supports a special function called __autoload, which is invoked, as it says, when code attempts to instantiate an object. So you could put that in there that says if for some reason somebody forgets to do the require, it'll already have been done. All right. Now, that said, also please look. The author says, the previous edition of this book demonstrated the use of this, but it has been deprecated in favor of the standard PHP library, which they'll go over in Chapter 8. So the point is, you'd say, well, why did you show it to us that nobody uses it? No, that's not the point. The point is there's still a boatload of code out there in which people have done that. And if you ever had to go and do any maintenance work on somebody else's code, you might see it out there. All right? I've seen it out there. Okay? So I thought that was important enough to mention to you. Now, he gives you a program in here that starts on the bottom. Well, I guess it's right here. It's 4.7. Starts on the bottom of page 137, just a little HTML and a comment, but I want to go through this. This is a really good program, and it's little. That's the whole thing. It goes up to line 55. But what he goes through in here is kind of the life cycle of an object. So you come up, you call the constructor, and it says in the destructor. I'm sorry, in the constructor, rather. Then you call a test, and it says basically you're creating a new object, you're about to leave the function, etc. And then you call the destructor, which says I'm in the destructor. So he's showing you basically the lifestyle of an object in this example that's on page 138, 137 and 138. And it might sound simple, and it really is simple, but it's worth your time, if you have any, to take a look at it and just see what it's about. Okay, next thing they talk about on here, we'll be done right around 11, so we don't, I mean, rather than breaking now and going on for 10 minutes, I'm just going to go for 10 minutes. All right. Next they talk about UML. Anybody know what UML stands for? How about now? Does anybody know what UML stands for? It's the Unified Modeling Language. And again, I've not done this in a while, but my guess is if I go out here to Google and I type in UML, I'm going to get several million hits. 39,500,000 hits. All right, a good place to start, uml.org. Lot of information in there. The bottom line is this, and I'm going to show you it here, and I don't know if this is going to be good or not, but let me try to come in here, and what I'm about to do right now is either going to work or it's going to be a flaming failure, but we'll know in a couple minutes. You might know faster than that. Oh, wait, maybe if I do that. Okay, that'll work. Let's do that. Let's put in a table. And we'll want the table to have 3 rows, just 1 column, and 3. Oh, this will work much better than I thought it would. All right. Okay. this is similar to the UML diagram that you see on the top of page 140 in your book. But I want to take, and in here, I want to take this whole thing, and I want to center what's in here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to write class name. So let's suppose that I created just what we saw before. All right, so I have here rectangle. Okay, and then in here I put the class methods. Rectangle. That's nice. So I put $width, $height. And in here, I put the methods. So let's say I've got set size, and I've got, I don't know, I'm going to make some up. Set area, set perimeter. Okay. So what you see as far as the way that this is written is you take and you have a square. I know this isn't a square, but you have a square, and you take that square. I'm going to try to make it more of a square. All right, and you take that and you break it into thirds. The top third has the name of the class, the middle third has the name of the attributes, and the bottom third has the name of the methods. Why would you want to do that? Well, you can buy yourself software that if you create a UML diagram, which oftentimes that's what analysts will do, you take your diagram, you funnel it through some software, and it literally starts to write shells of code for you. All right, and you can go both ways if you get extensive enough software. You can get software that'll take your code and make UML diagrams. You can take software that'll take your UML diagrams and turn them into code. All right, so he tries to sell you on why you might want to do this. Okay, and he gives you a couple benefits right here. It says first, if you sketch out the design before coding, you improve your chances of getting the code correct from the start. In other words, even something as simple as that, seeing it up there, you might think, I need this or I don't need this type of an idea. Second, a principle of OOP is encapsulation, separating out and hiding out. So when you start to do this, you can start to say, okay, it might very well happen that when you start to do what you see right here, you might have hundreds of methods. All right, so you can start to say, okay, I've got these hundreds of methods, and yeah, Mark would be really good for this, Zach would be really good for this, Teresa, you know, when you start to lay out work type of an idea. All right, so that's what he's talking about in here. And there's more to it than that. You can get much more explicit, like they show here. Notice what they have here is they put the name of the method, then in parentheses, all right, they put the parameters, and then after a colon, they put the return type. So you can be as explicit in here when you use UML as you want to or need to be. All right. Again, uml.org is a great place to start. We used to have a class in that. In fact, some of the people on our advisory committee are upset that we don't have systems analysis and systems design classes anymore. I didn't mind teaching them. And I thought they were good classes. The problem is, again, every time you add a class here, you've got to remove a class. All right, and it's what we're doing right now is hopefully the best way. Well, that isn't even true, but it's the way that the school has decided it's going to be for right now. All right. Last thing that's discussed on the last 4 or 5 pages of the chapter is the author talks about using PHP Documentary, and I want to show you something from PHP Documentary. So in all this stuff that we've been looking at all period here, if you follow the instructions that are in the book, all right, if you follow those, and it's going to end up, I think it was under docs. Classes. I don't know. That's not it. This doesn't look like much when you see it, but if I click right here, does that kind of look familiar to you? That's sort of like when you use JavaDoc, it's sort of the same type of comments. And that's the rest of the, really, literally, that's the rest of the chapter. The author says here, If you go out to www.phpdoc.org, you can find out more information. All right? I will tell you that I had some problems getting this to work the way that he explained it and the way that he said to do it. All right? He put the Java doc comments on here. That's not a problem. All right? He's got some more Java doc comments here. That's not a problem. But then what he said was, what you want to do when you go in and start working with this stuff, this is on page 146. All right? And the chapter only goes to 148, so we literally have 3 pages left. He says you want to do all this stuff. All right? And it works, but if you want to make sure that it works, you got to go out to here. That's going to look really bad. So, how to install and uninstall pair packages. The author explains here on how to do everything, and he says, "Hey, I want to do this, and nothing's working." So of course, since it's not Stack Overflow, but it's like it, and the person says, "Well, I tried doing it and it didn't work," etc., etc. And then somebody else comes in and says, "You know what? You're all making it way too hard." If you read this and you follow the instructions that are on page 3, it'll work. If you go, do I have to care? No. All I wanted to show you very quickly was the fact that PHP has a product that's like JavaDoc. It's PHP Documentary. And in order to do it, you have to add stuff from pair. And pair is the PHP, I don't even remember what it stands for, but it's some kind of a repository where you have to go bring stuff into PHP so that you're able to use it. And if you follow the stuff that's in here under what I've given you here under the how to install and uninstall pair packages, and you look at the stuff that I believe the stuff on page 3, all right, just read the whole thing and take a look through it, okay? I mean, this spreadsheet writer, who cares? But on one of these pages that's in here, I just ended up following this. I looked at a few different things online, and this seemed to be the best one, and that's why I put it in there. All right? So, we've knocked out now another chapter, so when you come in here next Tuesday, we'll be going over Chapter 5, Advanced OOP, and next Thursday, Chapter 6, more Advanced OOP. Then we break away a little bit in Chapter 7 and talk about design patterns, and Chapter 8, using existing classes. Then again, we'll spend at least an entire week, if not 2, on Chapter 9, reading that CMS with OOP. All right, so that's the next few weeks, just so you have an idea what's going on. Questions? The rest of the period is yours.